I'm just wondering why it is that we have under new business a resolution without any resolution language or supporting documentation.
Resolution, your new business.
It's Resolution 2019-281, a resolution directing staff to prepare a list of actions and recommendations. If you pull this up online, all it is exactly what you're seeing here in our agenda. Typically, resolutions have, whereas clauses and be it resolved and so forth, and there's not any of that for this
Deputy
particular
Superintendent.
resolution.
President Bourne, Commissioners, Commissioner Musich. So most recently when we've been getting directives that come from commissioners to staff to direct them to do things, it has just been the direction language that goes into the direction and not a resolution or background along with it. So we followed the same course of action with this one.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused then why something like this wouldn't come up through committee via like the person that brought this to staff coming to the committee chair saying, I think this is something that needs to be addressed, and working with them on putting something together so it could be discussed in detail in committee, and the rest of us then would have the background information to be able to decide whether or not this is a reasonable request to make of staff.
Commissioner Musich, that is a very reasonable question. You have the opportunity to refer this into committee. I worked with staff to prepare the agenda and place this under new business of the full board, but you can certainly make the request to refer it to committee. Is there any other
I'd like to
discussion?
request that this be referred to committee then.
Okay. That motion would be, we have a motion on the floor to approve the agenda. You could offer an amendment to the agenda to pull this, and then the committee chairs can work, any committee chair can work together, so you can make an amendment to pull this. Otherwise, a motion would also be in order when we get to this item in business to refer it then. So those two motions would both be in order. Is there one of those you would like to offer?
I guess I'm not entirely sure which would be more appropriate since I don't know who's asking for this, or.
If you'd like to do it right now, the first motion to amend the agenda to remove 2019-281 would probably be the most appropriate. They both have the same end result.
I think I'll wait so that maybe someone could explain to me why they're asking for this.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the agenda? Commissioner Meyer?
So my understanding is this was before by Commissioner Coco. Just asked him if he's okay with deferring it to committee, if he is. So I'm not sure which committee that would be, operations, I suppose. Yeah. So I'll put forward an amendment to amend the agenda to remove this item from tonight and to refer it to the operations committee.
There's an amendment to there's an amendment to modify the agenda to just remove 2019-281. I'll hear that as an amendment. Then anybody can just bring something forward to committee. So there's a resolution to remove 2019. There's a resolution to amend the agenda to remove 2019-281. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. There's one, the motion carries to amend the agenda. Is there any discussion on the amended agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the agenda carries. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of July 10th, 2019. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes of July 10th, 2019, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Reports of officers, Superintendent Bangora.
All right, thank you, President Board of Commissioners. Here we go. All right, so welcome, everybody. I'd like to start off with athletics, aquatics, and ice arenas. There are 1,063 participants in summer swimming lessons across our system. What an incredible number, and we wanted to share that with you. The Open Swim Club has 882 participants taking advantage of legally and safely swimming across our lakes. And what a wonderful event that has been and continues to be. And I'm going to join in soon, hopefully, with Mr. Misha, hopefully. There are 173 adults taking lessons, tennis lessons this summer. And registration has begun for fall youth sports and for football, soccer, flag football, and volleyball. Contact your local recreation centers for more information on registration. Golf. The $22 Tuesdays for 18 holes of golf continues throughout the summer and at all 18-hole golf courses. Over 1,800 have taken advantage of this great offer so far. Recreation centers and programs. Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board Safety Camp took place from July 9th through the 11th at Theodore Park. 120 youth participated in a 3-day camp, which included safety tips, swimming, fishing, and more. Thank you to Adam Juarez and Leslie Vinson, two of our internal influencers, for coordinating this year's camp. And I didn't have a chance to get out there. I really wanted to make it out there, but what an incredible safety camp this year. And thank you to all that participated and really made this such a wonderful event. Youth development. Armitage, Fuller, and Kenwood Rec Plus sites took a field trip to the Snapology in early July. Snapology is located in South Minneapolis and offers programs that promote learning through fun and interactive experiences using popular building toys, including Lego blocks and Connects. Planning. Parks for All Youth Design Team. The Youth Design Team for Parks for All attending tonight's meeting and are here with us in the audience. They are working for MPRB for the next year on Parks for All, the MPRB 2021 Comprehensive Plan. They were selected through a comprehensive process for this paid position and geographically draw from across the city of Minneapolis. They will bring youth perspective to all aspects of the comprehensive planning process. They are here tonight to see our board in action and to learn from the community, the commissioners, and the staff about the park and recreation system. So welcome, so glad to see you all here. Okay, we'll talk more later about that. Upper Harbor Terminal, Community Advisory Committee. First Community Advisory Committee meeting for the Upper Harbor Terminal project will be held on Wednesday, July 31st at MPRB headquarters. An optional dinner starts at 5 o'clock p.m. and the meeting convenes from 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. I am going to briefly, before I even go further with the rest of it, just talk about the slope failure along the east bank of the Mississippi River Trail and Parkway that just happened this morning. I'm just going to read briefly in our correspondence that we put out to the community and to the press. At approximately 9:30 a.m. this morning, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board MPRB staff were notified by the University of Minnesota of a slope failure along the Mississippi Riverbank next to East River Parkway, which runs along the upper bluff along the slope. The slope failure occurred between Washington Avenue and Arlington Street. Soil and debris slogged off the upper bank and slid down the slope towards the river. At this time, there has been no report of personal injury or damage to the parkway, vehicles, or nearby buildings. Safety is the MPRB's primary concern. The trail, which also runs along the upper bluff and is directly adjacent to the slope failure area, sustained damage and was closed off this morning. MPRB staff and the MPRB geotechnical consultant are on site to conduct initial safety assessment and have temporarily closed the parkway while the investigation takes place. Although recent heavy rainfall is presumed to have had the role in the slope failure, a full thorough assessment needs to be conducted. And after I'm done with, of course, the reports, there can be more questions, and I will defer that to Cliff Swenson or Michael Schroeder. Forestry. Forestry is partnering with the University of Minnesota on a research project involving the hardiness of plant trees. With the advancement of climate change, the Forestry Department is looking at new tree types, such as plant trees, that will expand the diversity of our urban forest. Environmental management. This year's pollinator party, a celebration of bees, is Thursday, July 25th from 5 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. at Lindale Park Gardens. The party brings together scientists, honeybees, wild bees, musicians, beekeepers, and more to inspire people to act and protect bees. Youth are encouraged to forage for bee knowledge and to earn free honey and ice cream cone. For more information, of course, go to www.minneapolisparks.org/bees. Maintenance operations, pools. Boston Wading Pool is now open and 2 summers of being closed for repairs. So that's wonderful. Riverside and Pearl are back open after underground water line breaks and repairs. North Commons Park is scheduled to reopen on Saturday, July 27th, 2019. And we wanted to share with you this graph, this actual matrix that really shows how we're doing, and having really 55 pools open, 7 that are closed temporarily and 2 that are closed for the season. Very proud of the work that staff have done to keep these pools open and running, and we will continue to share this information. PV Park, the new soccer field is now under NPRB management. Asset management staff are working to establish turf grass, roots, and getting a solid base. The field should be ready for play in the fall. So it's coming soon. I know people are really excited about that, and can't wait to get on that field. With that, thank you, President Moore and Commissioners. That's all I have at this point, at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Bangora. Questions of the Superintendent's report, Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. I just wanted to share my excitement at the fact that Boston and so many of our other troubled pools are reopened already this season. The initial estimates were not great, and staff really persevered and pushed and made it happen, and it's super hot, and the kids have been out really enjoying the pools, so it's exciting to see happen, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Moving on, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda, items 2019-277 through 279. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the consent agenda carries. Chair Vita.
I would like to move Resolution 2019-272, resolution acknowledging Minneapolis Parks Foundation full attainment of fundraising commitment for the mezzanine phase of the Waterworks project as described in River First Fundraising Agreement Number 1, and suspending board policy and procedure to approve the names of 6 features within the project, including 1, Waterworks Park Pavilion, 2, Linsamere Family Foundation Classroom, 3, General Mills Plaza, 4, Bank of America City Steps, 5, Nature Play Lab by Caroline Amplatz, and 6, Richard M. Scholl's Family Foundation Atrium.
272 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, I would ask the Secretary to take the roll.
Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Cogill.
Aye.
Commissioner Severson.
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Vita.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney. Vice President Dasan.
Aye.
President Bourne.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Chair Forney.
On behalf of the Planning Committee, I'd like to move Resolution 2019-276, a resolution, resolution approving the purchase agreement to purchase Towerside Park and amending the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board 2019-2024 Capital Improvement Program to allocate $55,000 in 2019 to Towerside Park from the Prospect Park neighborhood portion of the Parkland Dedication Fund for legal and administrative costs.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on 276? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Our first item under new business is our 2020 state bonding request. For that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Arvidsson.
Good evening, President Bohr and Commissioners. I have a very brief presentation, and most of this is really to get some guidance from you on submitting our requests for 2020 state bonding. These would be the annual requests we normally put in for the general obligation, or GO bonds. In the past, we have successfully received GO bonds for most recently the Upper Harbor Terminal, and then previous to that, the Sculpture Garden. So these are occasionally very important funds for us. The preliminary requests for GO bonds have already been submitted, but there's an opportunity by October to revise and add to those requests. The projects that I submitted are those that are included in the current legislative agenda. So it is the Mississippi River Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project for $4 million, 26th Avenue North at $3 million, the Waterworks Riverside Phase at $5 million, and the Grand Rounds Missing Link at $12.3. Historically, we've also asked for funding for the Upper Harbor Terminal, but as I noted, that was funded by the state in 2018. So the projects that have been on our legislative agenda that we have submitted, this is the Mississippi River Habitat Project, which is essentially an initiative to really start to begin restoration activities on much of the land that we do own on the Mississippi River now. There's some parcels that are large enough that we can start having the due diligence to restore the shoreline in these areas. One thing I will note is that we have a current LCCMR funding proposal in before the LCCMR that has been received positively. It's possible that LCCMR might be a better place for this to live, seeing as it's restoration focused than a straight bond project. But again, that's something that can be discussed among you. The $4 million included here would include some land acquisition, but that has indefinite timelines. And then alternate funding sources have been found for most of the Shearer site, as we well know. 26th Avenue North was a $3 million request for the overlook and the connection down to Ole Olson Park, just a few blocks from here. That has, in the past couple of years, garnered some significant support at the legislature, and I believe it was included in the most recent bonding bill that actually didn't ultimately go forward. But this is one that there's a lot of momentum around at the legislature, particularly with Representative Fooley. Waterworks Riverside Phase is something we asked for the first time last year as Waterworks Mezzanine Phase, which is the sort of inland phase, begins to get under construction. We need to start thinking about the other half of that park, and we've requested some state bonding to bolster the funding commitments that have been brought forward by the Minneapolis Parks Foundation and private donors to help with that project. And the last one is the Grand Rounds Missing Link. This project was recently adopted by you as part of the East of the River Parks Master Plan. It's obviously a long-awaited connection between St. Anthony Parkway and the river. There's a middle section of it, kind of right through here, or here, depending which map you want to look at, that is very complicated and is probably more of a long-term project. But some of the trailways along the roads on the northern end of the site, and certainly along the southern end of the site on 27th, could move forward quickly. We are actually working with the city of Minneapolis to do some work along Industrial Boulevard that you have provided CIP funding for, but this would allow us to do more in those areas in the near future. I want to put on the table for conversation a couple of other possible bond requests. And again, this doesn't have to be the whole world of things. I'm just trying to get a couple out there that we've been hearing about for the purposes of discussion. And those are acquisition of a CP rail line for the Loose Line, the North Commons Community Center Vision, and the Somali Museum of Minnesota. So the CP rail acquisition for the Loose Line runs through Worth Park and then down through the Bassett Creek Valley, essentially on the edge of North Minneapolis and Southwest Minneapolis. We've been working with some project partners, most notably the city and actually a couple of developers in the area, on what might happen in the Bassett Creek Valley and how we can make sure that there's a new Loose Line trail connection that goes through there. The route that was approved in the North Service Area Master Plan is this red line that you see. It would make a much more streamlined route of the Loose Line Trail, which currently kind of wanders about quite a bit as you move through that valley. So just a couple of notes on that. CP Rail has suggested their desire to sell this property. It is for sale. We are reviewing a draft appraisal, which we do have in hand for the line through Minneapolis. We've commissioned an appraisal, and we just have to do some tweaking to it. As I mentioned, this was approved by the North Service Area Master Plan. We recently held an interagency Bassett Creek Valley Summit, and land acquisition here was a top priority. We will be convening an interagency work group to look at that. It is possible, because of the way the rail line moves through park property as well as development sites, that the rail line could have multiple buyers, with the park board serving as kind of a lead buyer. And then state bonds would only be able to purchase that portion that would stay with us. So it's a complicated project, but not impossible. And then we do have an allocation in the CIP to the loose line itself, which could theoretically be used for acquisition, but could also be used for implementation, which might be a solid construction thing. If we were to do a request like this, we'd want to recommend asking for $2 to $4 million, which is probably about the range that the park portion of that rail line would cost. The North Commons Community Center is a vision that was adopted as part of the North Service Area Master Plan. I know there's been community members since the adoption of that plan that have been working toward this and sort of broadening partnerships. Because of the scale of these improvements, as well as the situation of the park in an underserved area of the metro and of the state, we could make the case that this is an appropriate bond expenditure. It would be part of this larger vision for a safe space, which would involve North Commons, North High, and the North Community YMCA. It is a significant re-envisioning in North Commons Park, as we all know. We do have some funding allocated in the CIP for North Commons, but certainly this is a very, very large project. The recommended funding request would have to be between $12 and $20 million, depending on the amount of outside funding that could be brought to the table, which would be necessary to move it forward. And then the last one, I don't have an image or anything to go along with this, but I certainly wanted to acknowledge the community-led idea to create a permanent home for the museum, for the Somali Museum of Minnesota in the MPRB park system. This doesn't exist in any currently adopted MPRB plan. However, sometimes public agencies do serve essentially as kind of a fiscal agent or a sponsor for nonprofit organizations that are seeking state bonding. The city does this on occasion, and this might be a model for this particular piece. And the recommended funding request at this point is unknown. I just simply didn't have enough information before tonight to put a number in front of you. So essentially, here's the projects, a list of the projects that I have noted before you tonight. And again, I'm trying to wrap up and give you a pause, President Bourne, at about 5:30. But these four here are the ones that were submitted in the preliminary request and are in the current legislative agenda to be bond requests. I just want to note a couple of things as we go through here and have this conversation. The Mississippi River Habitat Restoration and Public Water Access Project. Again, this is a project that has not gained a lot of traction in the state direct bonding world, but has been pretty well received in this round of LCCMR. It has scored highly throughout the proceedings so far. It's possible that that might be a better source for this particular work, which is about habitat restoration, aquatics. It seems potentially more aligned with LCCMR. You notice I got question marks after all these because it's discussion. A CP rail acquisition for the loose line. There may be some other partners like the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, the City of Minneapolis that might be able to bring funding to bear. And also the collaborative nature of purchasing this corridor maybe makes it something that we can actually pull together a partnership group. And then also utilize some of the acquisition fund money potentially, maybe even some that comes in from the Botno Light Rail funding that comes forward. So this is one I just question, do we go to the state or do we really look more with our sort of local regional partners to do this? North Commons Community Center, there's quite a lack of clarity on a match right now. I'll just be straight up about that. We just don't know kind of what additional funding could come from the private sector or from the community. However, sometimes when you have a big aspirational project, it's worth getting in front of legislators because you don't often get that on the first round. And that was true of the Sculpture Garden. It was true of Upper Harbor. So that's just one I'll kind of put in question there. And then as I mentioned, the Somali Museum of Minnesota, it could be sort of a sponsorship or partnership type of arrangement, which has been done by agencies before. I'm just highlighting with asterisks here in green the ones that do have some kind of match established, either through our CIP or otherwise. With that, I do have a slide here with a sort of a staff guess, but I won't show it to you until you ask me and until you have a conversation among yourself. So with that,
Jeez.
President Bourne, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvidsson. For discussion, I have Severson followed by Musich.
Thank you, President Moore. So with this $3 million, is this going to connect 26th Avenue to Ole Olson Park?
Commissioner Severson, President Bourne, Commissioner Severson, yes, that's the intent there. It would build the overlook and then also allow us to acquire easements and build a trail that would dip underneath the railroad bridge and come into Ole Olson Park.
And do we have permission from the railroad to do that?
We do not yet, nor with the adjacent landowner, the concrete plant, but we're working on both of those fronts.
That was my next question, the
Yes.
concrete company. Okay, that's interesting, but okay, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. I was hoping the commissioner from the 1st District would give us a feel for what he thought about the North Commons Community Center being on this list. So perhaps with his light still on, he'll bring the conversation back to that. The thing I'm not seeing on here, but that I am seeing a huge need for in the system, is our ability to adapt to climate change and its impacts on our infrastructure. We regularly are getting communications about trails that are impassable or that have fallen into a water body, or roads that are flooding, athletic fields that are flooding, so on and so forth. So I understand that much of our regional system, we're spending our funding on temporarily addressing some of these issues, but not doing the big scale changes that are required to not continually experience these conditions. So I'm wondering if it would behoove us to potentially talk with our partners at the city, the watershed districts that we have here in the city, about partnering on a bonding request to ask the state for money to begin implementing the components of our master plans that really address the large-scale impacts of climate change to people's ability to use our system. I know my district really well. I don't know all the master plans for every other district, but there are a number of areas where we are talking about really large changes in terms of reconfiguring the way trails exist and the way land exists within the system that would allow us to free up operations money to actually maintain the system rather than addressing these things. So something to chew on for my fellow commissioners and staff in terms of our partner agencies.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Forney.
Did you want to? Either.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Severson.
Oh, okay, I'll respond. Thank you, Commissioner Musich. There's a lot of excited Northsiders about North Commons Park that are really trying to lead this initiative. I would probably say Brett Buckner is doing a lot of the organizing work around it. I would be interested in seeing this. This would be a great asset for North Minneapolis, particularly the lower end of North Minneapolis, which obviously needs infrastructure improvement, programming improvement, basically all around. But financially, that is a big number, and I would really encourage our superintendent, anyone else to be, and Adam to be inventive and strategic, and maybe Mr. Rice can pull a rabbit out of the hat type of deal, right? He knows where some of that money is hid at times. But most importantly, I think the idea is getting this in front of Senator Bobby Joe Champion. I just texted him as we were talking about this. And like I said, hopefully this can be a 4 or 5 year plan, if not a 10.
So are you telling us you don't want this?
Thank you, Commissioner.
No, I do want this, absolutely.
Okay, as part of the bonding request?
Yes.
For 2020? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. Before I move on, I'll just note that the time is 5:30. It's open time where we take public comment from folks in the audience on virtually any topic. Before I get into the rules and our request during open time, I'll just note that I have no speakers signed up for open time, but I just wanted to clarify, is there anyone in the audience that was here to address the board this evening that did not have an opportunity to sign up on the list? Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to address the board this evening? Seeing none, I'll just move on beyond open time and go back to the discussion item. Commissioner Forney.
Thank you, President Bourne. Surprise, surprise. Thank you, Adam, for the presentation. It went away. Our slide. Anyway, the loose line, whatever, continuation and everything to me is, it's something that we've been talking about. It's a vision that, has been, and I'm very, very excited by this, and hope that it can be added to the list. I guess I should back up now. Okay, thank you. As far as what we currently have, I'm very happy to continue to support that. As far as the Grand Rounds missing link, I think it was interesting the way that you parsed out that and wondering whether or not would we have more success if we parsed out that request, the quote-unquote easier portions, anyway, that's just I leave that up to the professionals to advise on that, but I appreciate you pointing that out. The loose line, as I started to say, is something that, yes, and the more sponsors or partners that we can get in that would be marvelous. The North Commons, I agree and appreciate that you weighed in, Commissioner Severson, on that, because it has been a vision, and whereas unfortunately the museum, it doesn't seem to me that it has been a part of our vision. I know it was asked how many museums we presently have relationships with, and there is one, and it's been over 100 years, and it's a unique, very unique situation. So I would, whatever, that wouldn't be a priority to me at all. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. I think I have Meyer. Go ahead.
President Bourne, can I ask a clarifying question,
Yeah.
Commissioner Forney?
Sure.
With the, related to the Grand Rounds missing link, you said we could explore having more success if we parceled it out. The 12.3 million ask is for the southern and northern easy sections.
Oh, okay.
And not the
Thank you.
middle. Did you mean that we further might want to ask for like the southern 27th Avenue piece by itself, and then some other time ask for the northern piece by itself, or was it really just do the easy now, hold on the hard?
Do the easy now. I thank you for that clarification. I thought it was the whole missing link was that amount. Okay, thank you. And once again, if that's a situation that we think that we could move, if it was separated apart, whatever, it's just, thank you for pointing that out. Did I answer your question? Thanks, Adam.
Commissioner Meyer, followed by Kogel.
Thank you. Can I ask, why wasn't this put on the intergovernmental committee? Like, why wasn't it referred to that? It's not the first time that's happened. I've complained about it previously. Like,
Commissioner Meyer, I can address that question. The staff had put forward a request to put it on the full board's agenda. I complied with that request to put it on the full board's agenda. That note, I think, could be heard from all of our staff, and those future conversations can be directed to the IGR committee if you're looking for responsibility. I don't think you have to look further than the seat on why it's on the full board agenda. Is that
Mr. Robinson?
President Bourne, Commissioner Meyer, I forgot in the presentation to note what the next steps on this are. After this conversation, we'll actually bring forward a formal action that will be voted on by the board, and that action is intended to go through the intergovernmental, the legislative and intergovernmental committee. Historically, we've done the general discussion about bonding at the full board level just simply so that everyone's participating, but the formal action would go through that committee and then to the full board.
Okay.
Within about a month or so.
Okay, so this will all come back before we make any changes to the legislative agenda, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that was the key thing that I wanted to make sure happened, because we did put a lot of work into that, and we did prioritize them. And I'm very supportive of adding some of these items to that legislative agenda, but want to make sure that we're still respecting that work and properly prioritizing the projects.
President Bourne, Commissioner Meyer, it's always a bit of an odd schedule thing because the bond requests are due, and so they get out ahead of the next legislative agenda for the next session. So that's why we typically bring a formal action for what our bond request is, and then that ends up in the next legislative agenda.
So what is the deadline that you need to work with? Because you already submitted the one for June 14th, right?
Yep, the preliminary request was submitted, and then the final requests are due in October.
Okay, so there's still time to go through committee and the board.
Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cogill.
Thank you, President Bourne. Thank you for the overview, Mr. Arvidsson. I feel good about all of these. I'm wondering if there's any recommended hierarchy to these, or is that what you're looking for feedback on?
President Bourne, Commissioner Cogill, I am looking to sort of get some guidance from the board primarily on what are the priority projects for you and what things you think should be in the bond request. Obviously understanding that sometimes throwing everything at the wall isn't effective. We might need to have some things drop off. I do have some thoughts, but I didn't necessarily want to preempt the discussion by sharing that in the beginning.
Gotcha. Great. So I don't know if this is the best time, but I certainly appreciate having the Somali Museum of Minnesota on there. I think that is a fantastic idea, and I would love to see that be fleshed out. While it hasn't been in guidance in past planning efforts, neither have we had the perspective and advocacy that's necessary to incorporate that in the past, and I think that the initial discussions are promising, and finding a site for that and funding for that would be high on my list of priorities. Certainly the loose line trail is something that I've been interested in since I began in this position, and would love to see that. Those two are big priorities, and in fact all three that are kind of new that are not in the current legislative agenda are, I think, of greater interest to me personally, and I certainly would be interested in hearing from other commissioners about the give and take of what we would be swapping out, because to Director Arvidsson's point, I would be concerned about just putting all 7 of these forward. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. Any further discussion? I would just echo Commissioner Cogill's comments about the prioritization of doing a little bit of legwork on the Somali Museum so that we can start advocating for it, and it does earn a spot in our legislative agenda. We had a pretty timely and I think important request from Representative Newer and some folks in the community to get that ready. So even if it's not ready this year, I think the more that we can start envisioning what that partnership looks like would be a very good use of staff time. But seeing no further discussion, Mr. Arvidsson, do you have the direction that you were looking for this evening from the board?
President Bourne, yeah, I can hear the sentiments. I think we can pull something together that balances what we heard. And again, this will come back to the board in the next month or so with a formal resolution through the legislative committee, which then can obviously be amended and discussed by board members, both at the committee and the full board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvidsson. Moving on, I would entertain a resolution for 2019-280 to support for the participation of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board as a host site in the 2019-2020 Green Corps program in partnership with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to assist with waste reduction, recycling, and organics management initiatives.
So moved.
There's a resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none.
Could we have a presentation of it? To me, it's just a marvelous project, and I'd like to, if we have somebody available for that.
Yep. Lyndon, would you like to give us a little bit of background on the Green Corps application?
Thank you, President Bourne.
Thank you, Commissioners. Earlier this year, staff from the Management Analyst Team and the Asset Management Department put in an application for the Minnesota Green Corps program, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, focused on waste reduction, recycling, and organics management. This is a focus really on the solid waste streams at the Park Board, of which there are quite a few and managed in a variety of different ways in-house, through vendors, and in partnership with the city. Largely what we're looking for here is somebody to help us with identifying large scale improvements to divert waste from landfills or incinerators into more recycling, more organics, and doing some of the work, the research to figure out where we can get the most bang for our buck on this. To identify new opportunities and things like that we haven't previously had the staff or the time to look into. There's just a huge volume here and a lot of money that goes into managing these, removing these resources, I should say, from our system, whether they're internal or coming from the public. And having somebody dedicated for 11 months full-time to help us with this and assess these things would be incredibly helpful and something we don't currently have the capacity to do. This is especially going to build on some of our previous efforts. Most explicitly is our Events Go Green, which has been going on for quite a number of years, and actually started around the same time as the last Green Corps member we hosted, which I believe was 2012 to 2013. It'll build on our much expanded organics collection program, which is now in all public Minneapolis Park and Rec Board buildings and our maintenance facilities. 55 tons of organics removed from those buildings last year. As well as build on our recently expanded recycling in regional parks, which was established in 2017 throughout the entire regional park system. It took until 2018 to get fully built out. But building on that infrastructure we've put in place and those programs we've put in place is really our goal with this initiative. A little bit more background on the Minnesota Green Corps. It is an AmeriCorps program sponsored and operated by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The AmeriCorps member works for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, but we are a host site, so they will be embedded with our staff, working out of our buildings, and supervised by myself and my team to work across our agency and throughout our agency. The work plan that we put together for this member, which will take quite a lot of elaboration to really, once we have the member in place and know their skill sets and where we can best spend their time, had a variety of different areas. Field work is a big part of this, everything from trash audits, physically going out, looking what's in our containers, looking what's in different sites, whether they're beaches or neighborhood park and playgrounds. Part of this will be education of staff, and that includes preparing materials, whether they're written materials for customer service to use on the phone, or guides that are given to new hires so they understand the difference between recycling and organics as they work in our buildings and facilities. We would like to include a public awareness component to this person's work, whether that's through social media or email blasts or new signage that we put in parks. To help people learn about the ever-changing rules around organics and recycling through Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board park system. We'd like them to do some research projects for us as well, whether it's alternative materials and supplies, green purchasing, things that we can build on but haven't had the time to explore fully. Sometimes that's as simple as calling other park systems and asking them what they do. Other times it's really a lot of reading and writing up so that we can get things in front of staff or the board for that matter to really evaluate and see if it's a good fit for our organization. And lastly, new opportunities. There are things we do that really we haven't looked at critically in a long time, whether they're contracts for management of solid waste, or things that other cities are doing that is not on my or any of our radars at this time. We want this person to spend a lot of time getting to know our system early on so that they can bring up those new opportunities and identify things that we hadn't thought of before. The Green Corps program is a statewide initiative. One of the benefits of this is there will be, I believe, 19 other Green Corps members across Minnesota working on solid waste reduction initiatives. So they have a built-in peer group to learn from each other. Everywhere from the Minneapolis public school system to the city of Duluth. So this person will be able to connect with a peer network that can help us identify opportunities that other places are already doing or that they're willing to try if they can exchange knowledge with us. Lastly, and this is a key part, is that reductions in waste is really, everybody has to be on board. There's got to be awareness, there's got to be dedication, there's got to be knowledge, and there's got to be resources made available to all our different departments. We'd like this Green Corps member to be somebody who can work across our departments, whether it's meeting with staff and putting out a friendly competition between rec centers on who's improved their organics recycling rate the most in a 11-month span, or working alongside our aquatic invasive species staff to make sure that bait is disposed of properly and not contaminating recycling. Talking to customer service, the number one set of emails that I get forwarded from customer service to help answer from the public is around trash recycling and organics. What do we do? What's correct? What have we tried? Writing up some of that and making a guidebook or a cheat sheet that helps answer these questions to the public is something we'd like this person to help work on. So this is really somebody we want to bring these initiatives, which belong to multiple departments, into play by meeting with these people, getting to know their work, and being the linchpin for the work that needs to be done to improve it. So, any questions?
Thank you, Lyndon. Are there any other questions, Commissioner Forney?
No questions. I'm just excited. Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of Resolution 2019-280, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Moving on to petitions and communications. If he's ready, I had a request to start with Superintendent Bangor. I just had something else to add.
Thank you. Thank you, President Warren, Commissioners. I feel like when I was giving my officer's report that I didn't give enough acknowledgement to these wonderful young people that are here today from the Parks for All Youth Design Team. And I wanted to recognize that they're here tonight with us. They're sitting in the audience, and they've been doing wonderful work. And I just wanted to acknowledge them for being here tonight, for the work you've been doing, and I'm just so proud of you. So if it's possible, I'd like you all to stand up so that the board can see you and acknowledge who you are. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, President Warren, Commissioners. I appreciate it.
And thank you, folks, for all of your work. I'm going to start with Commissioners with petitions and communications with Commissioner Vita.
Thank you, President Bourne. And thank you, Superintendent Bangor, for embarrassing them all again. They were all over there hiding the first time you acknowledged them, and then they're all like, oh, not again. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all your questions before the meeting started. We really... one of the young men asked if the meeting was what did we think was gonna happen in the meeting, and Commissioner Cogill and I kind of said, well, you never know. And I think this is the first time since I've served that no one has spoke in open time. So there you have it. Sometimes there's 50, sometimes there's none. So it's a little bit more quiet today, but you're always welcome to come back and attend meetings whenever you want. And they'll always be different. I guarantee you that. It will always be different. I think the superintendent also acknowledged Safety Camp. Safety Camp was absolutely wonderful. I went over, Commissioner Severson and I were there together for the barbecue celebration for Safety Camp. Leslie and Adam did a great job. They pulled together a team of people that really made it different. There was park police there were state troopers there were Minneapolis K-9 there teaching kids about the dogs, there were I think they partnered with PCYC and some of the local youth camps. The group was super diverse. The young people were having a great time. The barbecue allows for parents and family members to come in and also learn about what the children are engaging in at Safety Camp. And it was just an absolutely wonderful event. It was a great way for me to spend my workday lunch hour meeting young people who frequent our parks and use services in our parks. I met two young ladies Mayrani and Fartoon that both work at Whittier. They're a part of the Parks Pathway program. And they just walked up to me and started talking to me about how they were in the program before and now they're mentors, and they took a group of young people on public transportation and how they were nervous at first, but it was great that, you know, they made it back safely. They invited me to a bike ride at Whittier Park. It was just great to hear young people talk about their experiences in our parks and how it's happening year after year after year for them. So again, thanks to everyone. Larry Umphrey did a great job at making sure that this also was kicked off in a big way. When I talked to staff, they said, Larry said, make it great. That's it, just make it great. And it was absolutely great. It was a lot of fun. And then the second thing, I attended my first St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board meeting and got to take a tour of the Pillsbury A Mill along with Superintendent Bangora, Commissioner Forney, and Commissioner Severson. That was all. I mean, I'm sorry. Commissioner Meyer, I'm so sorry. He'll never forgive me for this. I'm telling you all right now. He will never, ever forgive me for this. But it was a great time. We got to tour the tunnels that I didn't even know were there. And I think they said something like 5,000 people toured them for Open Doors Minneapolis or something like that. So it was great to see that. Again, another opportunity right here in our city that is available for people. That was like, who knew it was there? Maybe Commissioner Meyer knew it was there, but I didn't know it was there. So it was good. I think that's all for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Vita. Commissioner Meyer.
I have already forgiven you, Commissioner
Oh,
Vito.
thank you.
It is the second time that I've been conflated with the commissioner from District 2 tonight.
Oh, that's true.
I screwed up, sorry.
I also enjoyed the tour of Pillsbury A-Mill. I was on the neighborhood association when we approved that building originally. It was very close to being demolished because it was unsafe, so I was glad that we were able to save that because as they noted during the tour, there's a lot of potential there to help create a tunnel to build access to Pillsbury Park across the street because they already have an elevator that goes down there. So I'm really looking forward to what they come up with the money that the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board has been paying for with their studies. We had our third mudslide in 5 years today, so it's becoming a real problem for us. This one was on East River Parkway, and like Superintendent Bangora already talked about, I went and visited the site this afternoon. It's going to be closed at least until the weekend because there's going to be more rain coming and possibly more sliding happening. But grateful to the staff at the city, the university, the park board, and the county for their swift work on that. Lastly, I've been getting a lot of complaints about the drinking fountains being out of order along the riverfront. I don't know if other commissioners have gotten that as well, but it's just a coincidence that they all happen to be broken along the riverfront. It's not that they're not turned on or something. They are broken. There are severe problems with several of the pipes. And they've been working as swiftly as they can, but it's going to take a while before we get them back together. I've been working with Assistant Superintendent Barrick on this. I do think that since they've been out of operation for so long, and since they're all along the river, we should probably start putting signs up because people walk up to them, expecting them to work, and then they don't. But yeah, we appreciate staff's work on that and ask for the public's patience before we get them up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Cogill.
Thank you, President Bourne. I have a couple of items to discuss. First, I've been contacted by many constituents regarding the fish kills that are happening in Cedar Lake and like the Isles and throughout the system, which is really unfortunate, but I have appreciated the communication of staff so that I'm informed enough to provide everybody a good amount of background as to why that's happening and the oxygen levels deeper in the lakes. I know that it's concerning to folks, and just know that every staff and DNR and everybody are working diligently to understand what's going on, and staff are cleaning up the fish that are coming up against the shores. I also wanted to mention ahead of the Operations and Environment Committee that I intend to bring forward an amendment to the agenda to discuss Resolution 2019-281 regarding an action to consider recommendations for staff to consider recommendations to ban single-use plastics in events. This is something that I brought up consistently a couple of different times at Petitions and Communications over the last 4 months. I think that waiting is a disservice to the people of the city of Minneapolis. It's something that I brought forward to the superintendent, and this is the form it took on the agenda. And so while I appreciate Commissioner Musich's desire to have a process that is consistent, I'm hoping that she'll consider adding it to the agenda so that we can have a discussion, a public discussion about the values of having staff consider actions that will let us have plastics-free events in our system. I think it's a disservice to the public of the city of Minneapolis to not have that discussion. And I don't think that delaying it is, especially on a night where we don't have a crazy agenda, is also a disservice. So I'm hopeful that that amendment will pass. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. For just a clarifying question before I move on, Commissioner Cogill, is it your intention to hope to still bring that forward tonight at the full board at the conclusion of operations and environment?
Given what the resolution language is, yes, that would be ideal. But if that doesn't happen, then we'll have to amend the resolution language.
I will tell the entire board the process that I'll consider, knowing that conversation is out here. I will recess the full board instead of adjourn the full board if that moves forward out of committee. I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules to add the item to the full agenda, to add the item to the full board, which will require 6 votes. So I will suspend the meeting tonight, and we'll see how, or I will recess the meeting tonight, and we'll see how your Operations and Environment Committee goes. I understand and share the urgency with the agenda item. Commissioner Forney.
Thank you. Commissioner Severson and I chatted a bit about the possibility of bringing forward a motion regarding Central Avenue and approaching some legislators about traffic calming and that. And so we'll be talking about that at some point in time. I too, yes, was at the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board meeting, and I'm delighted to hear that the 2 commissioners at least had a wonderful time doing the touring, and it seemed as if the superintendent also had a good time. In spite of the fact that some 5,000 though people saw those tunnels, I'm just really upset about the fact that our own assistant superintendent of planning has never been in those, and so yeah, exactly. And there's just so many things like that staff is whatever, they're locked into their offices down there and they don't get out. So I hope that we can get that arranged, and as well, I've advocated for getting the entire planning department to go to Waterworks, the Minneapolis, where our source of water is. So I'm hoping that that will happen and you all can see it. There's some amazing infrastructure things throughout that people don't know about. Anyway, and as Commissioner Meyer indicated, architect Tom Myers did make a proposal of several different designs of how there could be some interactive entrance exit to our parks from the A mill, because it is, it speaks to, literally, the foundation of this city's, evolution. And so I hope that that's something that we will stay tuned to, and I appreciate the enthusiasm on that. I had a meeting with the Parks Foundation Development and Finance, their regular meetings, and I just have to applaud them as far as constantly thinking of innovative ways to how we can support financially support our system here. I'm excited that next week, this week it's going to be, that I think there's 10 or more of staff and commissioners that are going to be going to the Greater and Greener Conference in Denver. And that to me is one of the most exciting conference that we have. It's so creative. It gets people literally out into the parks. And I hope that we can come back with some great ideas, staff and as well as commissioners. I have out-of-town guests right now, and it's always the unfortunate thing that they're the ones who get you out to see things. And so I went to the MIA. I'm sorry, I haven't converted to Mia. But I went to the Native American Women's Art Exhibit. It's utterly amazing. Everybody, please, I encourage you to go to that. And I wish that I had thought of that earlier when we had the discussion about the bonding. And if there is any over-the-top obvious museum that we should be engaging in, it really should be Native American. That is such an untold story, and it is so integral to, I think, our park system. I could be wrong, so people will have to correct me and everything, but I'm not sure that we have any legislators that are Native American at this point. We have a lieutenant governor, so maybe we can. Is there? I'm not. Am I? Okay, I apologize. Okay, but I hope that people will be open to that. It really is something that's so underserved, and so I just wanted to give my aha. And so, if Adam, if you can stick that into your little thought pocket of potential bonding ideas, that I think is paramount. That story needs to be told. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. I had the opportunity last night to go to the first girls' bike program event that was funded through the Walt Dietzig Innovation Funding that was put in place in our budget last year. It was just really fabulous to be able to see these young women growing their confidence. It's something that really gave me a lot of joy, because oftentimes you see young women not lacking a lot of confidence and not having that confidence encouraged or grown by the environments that they're in, and this program really clearly is helping them to grow that confidence, and it made my heart grow 2 sizes larger, I think. So for those of you that might be interested, they meet on Tuesday nights. They meet up at the Nokomis Community Center. It's a really awesome thing to see. They will be adventuring further afield, but that's where they start, and it's cool to see. So if you have an opportunity or you feel like you have an interest in that, I would recommend you check it out. As it continues to be incredibly hot and humid and crazy, I just wanted to let people know that there are a number of cooling centers throughout the city, some of which are park buildings, most of which are owned by the county or the library system. All of them are found on the Hennepin County website on a map. So if you Google cooling centers, you can find a place to stay cool if you do not have access to air conditioning in your home. And I also would like to apologize to my colleagues from the 1st and 2nd Park Districts for not remembering that the 2nd District is north and the 1st District is northeast and southeast Minneapolis. So I apologize for flipping those in my head. It's always seemed incongruous to me that we would number them in such a way as to go right to left.
We do them first to last.
Yeah.
Best to worst.
Strike that from the record.
As a commissioner from the 5th district, I would have to heartily disagree with you. And since I was attempting to be civil and apologetic,
Yeah, come on, Chris.
I would ask my colleague to embrace the apology and appreciate all the districts. I will demonstrate for you tomorrow on our walking tour of part of my district that it is a pretty awesome place to be. Anyhow, that's all I got. Thank you.
I hate to interrupt here, but I apologize, Commissioner Meyer. I'm
Thank you.
sorry, there is nothing that even remotely reminds, you guys are totally different.
That happened 3 times.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich, Vice President Hassan.
I'll pass.
I will just add, I want to thank our staff and our friends at the University of Minnesota and our other partner agencies for responding so quickly to the soil movement along the river today. And very fortunately, nobody was hurt, and we'll continue to monitor the situation. And our staff is available to anyone that's either watching tonight that has any questions about the recreational impact on the trail and potentially the parkway. Seeing no further business as of right now, I will recess the full board to go to committees. And I think our first committee is Chair Musich.
On behalf of the Operations and Environment Committee, I would like to call the committee to order and request that the secretary please call the roll.
Commissioner Kogan.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer.
Present.
Chair Musich.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve or amend the agenda.
I'd like to amend the agenda to add Resolution 2019-281, a resolution directing staff to prepare a list of actions and recommendations for the August 7th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, I guess, that will allow the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to ban single-use plastics in events in the Minneapolis Park and Recreation System by April 1st, 2020.
Commissioner Forney, you had something to talk about this?
I'm not on this committee, but I just wanted to ask, being this is about events, I wasn't sure, and it's therefore then permitting, whether or not should this actually be in admin and finance? I mean, I'm totally supportive of it, but I just wanted to raise that. Whatever.
I think we should just.
Okay.
Is someone who can answer that question? I don't know.
So I have a lot of questions about this, so maybe let's get it on the agenda so we can discuss it further so we understand what it is exactly we're talking about. So all those in favor of the amendment, I have to vote on the amendment then in the agenda. So all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That passes. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 That passes. We now have an agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve our minutes from Wednesday, July 10th.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those pass as well. We have an action item before us. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to just wait for one moment, Assistant Superintendent Barrick and Mr. Hama. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I'm guessing it's Finnish. So the item 2019-281. Commissioner Cogill.
I would like to move Resolution 2019-281, a resolution directing staff to prepare a list of actions and recommendations for the August 7th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners that will allow the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to ban single-use plastics in events and in the Minneapolis Park and Recreation System by April the 1st, 2020.
Thank you. So, do I have any questions? Commissioner Kogo.
I don't have any questions, but I will like to start by introducing this and then turning it over to Secretary Ringgold or Deputy Superintendent Ringgold. I know this is within operations and environment. I think that it kind of traverses a variety of potential committees. So to Commissioner Forney's point, this could come up at the full board or at Administration and Finance or here. But the idea is to identify steps that can be taken to swiftly move us towards a single-use, plastic-free event protocol within the system, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Ringgold to discuss more, if that is amenable to the chair.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you, Chair Musich, Commissioners. So as we had heard earlier tonight, in about 2009, there had been a sustainability plan approved by the board. There were several different elements to it, including an Events Go Green. So when this concept of banning the single-use plastics came up, we pulled a few people together just to see what still exists, what might still be there. And in conversations with individuals who do our large-scale events, so the Community Outreach Department, as well as those that get permitted within our organization, so our use and events area within customer service, as well as conversations about what might be currently happening from an asset management perspective, and then, of course, with Lyndon working through conversations on what would be happening around some of the waste management pieces. I was delighted to find that there's actually quite a bit still intact from the work that we had been doing in 2009, which is quite good to see. When you do work like that, you like to see it continue. And there are requirements around or guidelines, I should say, that had been developed around Events Go Green that look at waste and composting and all of those pieces. What staff really understood and suggested is that there's probably some percentage, I don't know if it's 10 or 20% of our events that happen in our system that are not able to comply, or it's difficult to comply. Mm-hmm. Many of the events that struggle the greatest to comply are those that are distance events, whether that be biking or running or other types of pieces. And those events would actually benefit from having some type of improvement in our system, in particular water hookups or additional aspects around transportation coming in them, those types of pieces. But considering the plastics piece, the concept of additional water hookups in particular was something that came up. Before going much further, staff would want to create a list of actions and recommendations. Some of those would have potentially a monetary component associated with them. Some of them might be more political policy type of pieces, and in some cases perhaps even intergovernmental, working with the city of Minneapolis, but wanted to be able to, if the board so chose, to be able to put together a list of what those items would be that would be then position the board to effectively implement a ban, knowing that folks would be able to comply. So that is the kind of background behind it and the level of information that we had been able to gather when starting to explore it. One of the things that staff did feel really strongly about is when we think of the waste that we have, the plastics that we have in our system, there's certainly those that we create ourselves through our buildings like this. There are those that happen through events that we do in our system. But a large proportion of the waste, especially the plastic waste that we have, comes from individuals who buy something at a coffee shop, they buy something at their local grocery store, and then they deposit it within our system, or perhaps don't deposit it within the proper receptacle within the system. So some of the things that staff really felt strongly is while events are important and they feel like we can quickly get there, they would want to also recommend improvements that would help address that general use of the system as well. So I think you would see a combination of those things if you pass this come forward from staff. So I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. I wanted to speak in favor of this. And also, I think we should have some discussion about how we approach commissioner-led initiatives. I share Chair Musich's pet peeve that when something's labeled a resolution, it should have, whereas and therefore clauses. I think instead, we should have a separate category for a staff directive when it's, a commissioner coming forward with something where they want to, basically have staff go look at something. It's basically the board saying we want staff to dedicate their time to this and then come back to us with recommendations and a plan. And we had a similar thing with this, with the pilot that I put forward for the pedestrianization project. And I think we should, maybe amend our rules or just standardize that process. But what I see this basically being is, the board saying this is something that we have enough interest in to have the staff spend their time on it, take a closer look, make some recommendations. The language maybe goes a little bit further than I'm prepared to fully get on with, the full ban. Commissioner Kogel and I tried to go plastic free for the month of April, and it was very hard. So I respect that it's difficult to get to 100%. Maybe language like come back to us with recommendations to restrict or limit the use of plastics would be more appropriate. But at this point, it's really just a staff directive to look at the issue. So that's something I definitely would like to see happen, and that's why I will be supporting this.
Commissioner Forney.
Thank you, Chair Muschitz. I'm not on this committee, but first of all, thank you for reminding us that you have done some research on this and the difficulty in complying. I feel like I'm neurotic as far as when it comes to plastics. It just drives me nuts. And what's it called? Plouting or something like that. It's when you're running and you stop and you pick up the litter and everything. I've become a walker that does that all the time. Huh?
It's plogging.
Plogging, thank you. Anyway, so I'm totally excited about this, but I have a lot of concerns. Number one is, since you've already kind of researched and you realize, as Commissioner Meyer indicated, that the difficulty in complying. And so whether or not really should it be more of an educational thing or an alert thing, whatever, we might be in that realm. And one of the things that I always think about is those horrible cigarette butts. The people are just, totally unaware, that they're tossing them out their windows or, walking around, whatever. Anyway, how do you ban that type of thing? But, consciousness raising about how this does impact our environment, I think would be, possibly that's more the angle we go. And then my other concern, and I appreciate that it was referred to, is about staff directives. How imperative. I mean, we've got this poor planning department that are completely locked down in their offices down there because they've got so much work, okay? Is that if something new is put on by commissioner directive and everything, we got to take something off. And how do we prioritize that? So I just really am sensitive to that you all as staff have a great deal that's on your plate and that we need to be cognizant, because I could probably popcorn all sorts of ideas of things I'd like you to do, but how it fits into the queue, I think, is something we need to have either direction from you, direction from the superintendent of how it's approached. So otherwise, I mean, I'm delighted anyway that we can curb plastics in our parks. Yes.
Mic is off.
What?
It's on
Yeah,
now.
there it's
I
on.
know.
For a minute, I was like, so one thing to note is that this would be specifically around plastics. Now, one of the things that I would say, and this actually goes to Commissioner Meyer's piece as well, is that by asking staff to look at a ban, it means that the actions we would bring forward to you would be to the highest level of potential action. right? So that you could then choose, the vision would be is that you as a board would look at what we would bring forward as things that would need to fall into place, and then you could scale that, right? So the vision here would be, we would prepare a list, we'd bring that to you on April 7th, August 7th, on August 21st. We would bring an action item to a committee level where that you would then be determining which things you actually want to do, and that would come up to the full board. So I just want to make sure that there's clarity around by saying something to a band level means you get the full extent of a recommendation, and then you can scale that back to education, you can scale that back to something over a period of time. That type of response could come from the board.
Thank you for the clarity.
Commissioner Bourne.
Thank you, Chair Musich. I'm amazed that I want to go a little bit faster than this than Commissioner Meyer does. We did go through a similar process with the Events Go Green in 2012, and we decided, in 2010, from some research that we had done, and then we had talked about waiting on it again, and then we 1 year added to another year, but we did finally get that done. And the one thing that I've been reminded by Commissioner Meyer of on multiple occasions, that to combat the impacts of pollution and climate change, while our individual actions have a lot of significant impact, government really has to step in when and where it's able to. And of the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of single-use plastic bottles that are brought in to our parks for events, it's easier for us to just say don't bring those anymore than it is to educate the 700,000 people between Minneapolis and St. Paul that will be coming to our event saying please don't do that. And we probably won't get 100% compliance with a ban right away, but we actually took a very similar effort with our tobacco ban through the park board. Was we ended it. We know people don't always comply, but then it gives us a tool to continue to educate. And things that are worth doing are difficult, and that's and I think that's why we're here. So I think the timeline just. I think that's actually a very reasonable timeline to have our site set on April 20th or April 1st of 2020, and we can move from there. To Commissioner Forney's point about prioritizing and with the planning staff, I would just, that is a real issue. In my appointment of Commissioner Forney as chair of the planning committee, that is within your purview to help staff prioritize certain things that can and can't come forward. We're looking as a collective at our whole goals, but I do that every single week with approving the agenda, and I know committee chairs already do that. So that said, I'm very supportive of this. I would be looking at a future meeting, maybe at the full board. A few years ago, we had a discussion around banning plastic bottles at our own vending machines, and it sounds like I may want to be attaching that to the resolution when it does come to the full board, but I also don't want to slow down the work that's already happening. It was my initial understanding that we had one vendor contract for vending machines in the park system. Now that's been broken up over the years into many, so I may be considering adding that onto the full board when I do have a vote, because I think that that's some low-hanging fruit that we could go after as well, because we're inviting a lot of those single-use plastics in. Thank you, Chair Musich.
Commissioner Cogill for the second time.
Thank you, Chair Musich. I just want to quickly explain my sense of urgency around this and passion for why I think this is an important thing to consider right now. Just coming off of last week's meeting where we were presented with gifts of mostly plastic trash from Lake Hiawatha, from super volunteer Sean Conedy, to major documentation about the amounts of trash in our oceans. While we're in a small system, in a small city relatively, it behooves us, I believe, as the Park and Recreation Board to take steps where it's possible in prominent ways on single issues, I think, to demonstrate our leadership on things that are difficult to do. It is going to be very hard to fully get rid of single-use plastics. That does not mean I don't think that we shouldn't try and we shouldn't be bold about it. As far as concern about our consistency, about how we prioritize our work, I don't think in 400 years of American government anything's ever been consistent. But what we can do is the thing that's right in the moment. And I feel very confident after consulting with staff that the April 1st deadline that is provided in this resolution was something that was recommended by staff. It feels to me that I'm going to trust staff to come forward with a recommendation that is feasible on their end. And I just so appreciate the vision and thought about doing something that's difficult. And the last thing I'd say is that in some ways we're behind. We're behind a lot of other cities across the country in terms of what kinds of uses are happening in our system and where we are in terms of what we provide in terms of plastics and sustainability integration for our trash pickup, just as a city in itself, not the park board necessarily individually, but throughout the city. And I think this is a step that I'm proud to take, and I'm really hopeful that I can gain support in being aspirational on this particular issue, and just thank everybody for the discussion tonight.
Thanks, everyone. So some of my questions have been answered. I'd like to first start with addressing Commissioner Meyer's concerns about not having a way to bring forward commissioner-led initiatives. In the past, the way that the board has managed that is by having commissioners bring forward ideas to committee chairs, and for those committee chairs to work with staff on including those items as study report items that would either then die in that capacity or generate some sort of action moving forward out of committee. So that's typically how it's been done in the past, in a way that allows for more robust conversation at a committee level, as well as providing commissioners with the data and information that they need to be able to make informed decisions about how we proceed with business in a transparent manner for the public. That's part of why I was concerned with this going forward just on the full board level, in that we didn't have the data we needed to be informed decision makers. We didn't have an opportunity to have a robust discussion at a committee level. We didn't really understand what the full scope of the impact of the motion would be before us. So that's why I asked that we have this before committee. I would have loved to have put a study report item on this topic on our agenda. I did ask at the beginning of the year what topics people wanted to cover. I have been systematically trying to address those as we move through the year to ensure that people are getting the information they need so that we can then take action on those items if there are actions that are prudent for us to be taking. So I'm happy to discuss with any of my colleagues, including colleagues not on this committee, initiatives that they think that we need to cover as study report items, so that we can take informed action as a board moving forward. So as I understand it, this would impact both park board events that we host and put on for the community, and then also permitted events being held by individuals or private organizations within our system. To the best of my knowledge, we start permitting things a year out. So ostensibly, we would be looking at April, May, June, July events that have already been permitted for 2020, in which we haven't put this restriction on people. And I would assume we have some sort of agreements with these people. How would we amend those? How would this impact them? Do we allow people to back out if they decide that what we're proposing is too burdensome for them? That's something I would like to hear. If this, I assume this is going to pass out of committee, even if I vote against it. But I would like that information provided to the board so that we have a full understanding of the impact that our action would take. I'm also interested to understand what the cost to the system would be per this change. Having picked up after events for decades in the city, probably thousands of pounds of trash, most of it plastic. I know that events are generating a ton of waste, and much of it is not getting picked up by volunteers that volunteer with these events. The marathon in particular is awful about actually getting things cleaned up. They say their volunteers are doing it, but I'm still spending hours and hours and hours after that event runs through picking up the trash that's left behind. So I do appreciate the impact that this has on the system, and I would like to see us take action on reducing that waste, but I also need to understand what that's going to cost us as a system and whether or not those costs need to be built into our permitting fees that we are charging people to ensure that we're able to not burden the taxpayer with what's essentially a private person's event. And then it'd be great too if we could understand what sort of single-use plastics are in use at our events here in the system. Most of the events I've gone to lately have all used compostable products for the things that I would typically think of as plastic. So I'd be interested to hear what single-use plastics are in use as part of our events that we're hosting here in the system. So I have a question now.
Oh, I can also answer several of the others.
Okay.
That you just raised.
Okay.
Yes. And
Lovely.
provide some clarity.
Well, if you
Yeah.
want to do that, that would be great.
Okay. So first of all, just to make sure we understand which events we're talking about. We're talking about the events, the large-scale events that we do. So those that community outreach does, everything from Red, White, and Boom to the Kite Festival, those types of events, the large-scale ones that we do primarily in the regional system. So that's that part. It would be another conversation to talk about all of the neighborhood park events. Not that we shouldn't go there, but that would be an additional conversation. And then all of the events that we permit within basically that regional citywide system. And it's important to note that we already have green guidelines for these events, and our staff already suspect that we are probably between 10 and 20% compliant. So they already feel like we're very, very close to being able to sustain this type of goal. I also want to make sure I'm clear that this is about single-use plastics, not waste in general. If the board wanted us to do additional research on how to remove all waste related to events, or how to ban all waste in events, that would be a modification to this particular resolution. This is really looking at single-use plastics at this time. And then, of course, the piece here is that we bring forward a list of actions and recommendations, which would include costs associated with them. So that would come forward with it for single-use plastics, as well as, in many cases, they're already using compostable type of products that are, so there's already a pretty high threshold of compliance, but this would help get us over that hump.
Okay, and then the last question I have is just staff capacity to take this on. It's being requested that we have this for the August 7th meeting. My understanding is that the material for the August 7th meeting really needs to already be submitted to be able to be available on that agenda. As someone who works in an office and schedules my work typically on a 1 to 2 week basis to ensure that I understand what my workload is and that the people that are relying upon my output are able to understand that I'm going to be able to deliver for them. Is there staff capacity to take on this effort and provide us with this information by the August 7th meeting date?
Chair Musich, Commissioners, yes. This date was selected in consultation with the individuals who would have to provide the information. And I believe that information is due to the superintendent next Thursday. So this was done in consultation with them.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, so seeing no further questions, All those in favor of item 2019-281, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. We now have a study report item, the 2018-2019 Winter Operations Review and Update. Welcome, Assistant Superintendent Barrick.
Good evening, Chair Research, Commissioners. It's a little odd to be talking about winter in July, but the reality is we are actually starting to shift gears in planning for our winter operations and improvements. We've kind of hit our summer groove where we've got things kind of normalized and out there and we're operating. And so now we start to shift our focus to how can we make the winter go more smooth than last winter. So I'm going to turn this over to Peter Hama. But this is a follow-up. Last November, before the winter season, we did a brief report on our snow removal, sand and salt, ice rinks and sledding hills. And at that time, we talked that we promised that we would come back with an analysis of the sand and salt in our snow removal. So Peter is an analyst with us in our asset management department. He's been working with ViewWorks and the plow operators to compile a summary for us here.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Musich and Commissioners. I'm Peter Hama. This is my first time presenting to you all, so thank you for having me. As Jeremy said, that last November, Lisa Beck presented to you a preview of what our winter operations were going to be, and we promised you some information, so here it is. It's Christmas in July, I guess. So what we're going to be doing is a little bit of review of what we showed you last November, and then we'll get to some of the new stuff. So this is an update on our snow removal for the salt and sand and some of our operations tracking that we went through. As part of the review, there are 19 dedicated equipment operators. In addition, we've got park keepers who, and they work together to clear snow and provide safe paths and walkways for the public, parking lots, trails, sidewalks, etc. We've got a variety of large and small equipment. You can see some photos of some of them here with the labels. As well, we have a bunch of small equipment, different Kubotas. Those Toros you can see are used, the same ones in the summer to cut the grass are being used in the winter to blow snow. We have a trail system in our regional parks. We've got neighborhood pathways that have had a pavement assessment. We've got 95 miles of trails and approximately 104 miles of neighborhood sidewalks and interior paths. And we have a parking lot system that's approximately 110 acres. Of that, we plow about 140 miles of space. That includes the regional trails. It equates out to be about 70% of all of our hard pavement. From the best of our estimates, we've got a comprehensive understanding of our neighborhood system, but we are making more guesses when it comes to our regional system because we've not had that comprehensive analysis. So some of the reasons why we are plowing what we do plow right now is because it's through history. We know that we have a reduced volume of users. We want to provide winter recreation activities, access to our amenities. We do it for safety of staff and budget reasons. A little bit more detail as to how an example of a park looks in terms of what we do plow and what we don't plow. This is from our GIS layer that shows Linden Hills Park. I just thought it was a good example. You can see the blue line around the perimeter and the blue curved line in the bottom left that goes through the park. That is our plow route that we have been operating against this last winter. The blue area to the right with the diagonal lines, that's our parking lot. That, and you can see there in the dark gray that kind of weaves through the bottom third of the park. That's all the hard paths through the park. So that shows you that we're trying to provide access, but it could show you some of the complications in terms of what it might be like in one park, in one example, and why we've chosen to do what we've done to this point. So for our snow removal protocol that we went through this last winter, is that any time that we would have 2 inches or more of snow, we would generate work orders, which I will show you a little bit later on. But if the snowfall fell under 2 inches, it was categorized as a standard maintenance. And it didn't, we wouldn't, when we generate work orders, it triggers a whole bunch of other things, such as overtime and protocols and tracking, which we'll get into. So for extreme winter events, which apparently was the entire month of February, we would need to do our operations a little bit differently. So we'd have a first pass, which would just be opening up the pathway. Second pass would be widening and clearing the openings. The third pass would be working on the crosswalks and the curb cuts and removing all the snow that the city had then pushed onto our places that we had already cleared. And then a fourth pass of final cleanup. So it became a lot more complicated. So this is what we told you we would do and why we're here today is the salt sand tracking. This is the first part of it. So we promised you that we would look into and try and track and figure out how much salt and sand we use and what does that mean. And I will say that we do ensure that all of our MEOs and our staff that handle salt and sand has been going to and will continue to go to the watershed district trainings. We have plans for that. So that's something that we view as very important. The park board uses a combination of 95% sand and a 5% salt mixture that we pick up from the city of Minneapolis. This year we've ensured that we have been picking it up in bulk using our dump trucks and bringing it to our sites, and that our vehicles use that amount and distribute it during times that it's necessary. The mixture of the salt in the sand is required for it to be pliable and movable enough so that we can lay it onto the ground. Without the salt, any moisture would freeze it like a rock and we wouldn't be able to use it. So we tracked our early winter and our late winter numbers there. I'm just going to it's a lot on the screen, but I'm just going to direct you to that bottom layer, that bottom line where it says total, where it says 53 salt sand yards. That's how we pick it up from the city. That's how it gets measured in the trucks. And then the 5% salt is 5.3 yards, 47 yards of sand. You can see the pound conversion there to the right. So that's, a bunch of numbers, but what does that mean? I've been talking to a couple of the different counties, the city. I've been trying to get information from other park systems in the area, and I will tell you that when I ask them how many pounds they use of salt, they tell me, oh, I use this many tons. So we are talking 14,000 pounds, and they would be talking in thousands of tons. That we use a 95% sand. Many places use that. The city uses the same salt-sand combo, but the counties and the state use largely a salt-only compound. So they would be dropping tons of salt, not tons of sand. And there's many different reasons for that. Somebody told me just today that if the city were to drop so much sand, they would have to go pick it all up, or it would get into the sewers. That causes its own set of problems. So it's a very complicated subject. But we did the same conversions down at the bottom by I did it both for you, so you could look at for the of square foot of pavement, and that's of salt and salt-sand combo, salt and then sand for per square foot over the entire season, and then per 7-foot lane mile. The lane mile is a very common metric with MnDOT, but we have it's a 12-foot lane mile that they talk about, and we have 7 feet because most of ours are paths. The second part that I wanted to show you is our snowplow route pilot. So we were using ViewWorks this year, and we had 15 routes. They're broken up into 287 segments. And this gets to how fast are we getting to our paths and our parking lots in the season. So we have when there'd be more than 2 inches of snow, we would generate all the work orders. They'd get split into 15 different categories, and everybody would wake up look at their phone, say, "Oh, I've got to go do my work orders." They would get their equipment, and they would go on their path as we have designated. So here's some numbers. This is the fun, colorful part. This is over the whole season, and you'll see that we had a big improvement between the early season and late season, which I'll show you next. But on the right there, we got to 61% of all of our assets in the first 8 hours, 84% in the first 24 hours, and 98% in the first 48 hours. So our early winter, we had 5 snow events that triggered that 2-inch plus response. We had 15 inches of total snow just in those events. That's the amount of overtime we paid, and you can see that our totals in the first 8 hours were much lower than the yearly average, 52%, 30, 41. But this is the first time that MPRV had tracked snow removal in this way, and we are going through the change curve. We are having to teach people how to use the system. What does it mean? We are having, if somebody was sick or wasn't in, or we didn't have enough staff for that day, or we had a broken piece of equipment, we'd have to reassign the work orders to other people. It was complicated, and there was a learning curve. So second half of the season, we actually view as a better analysis of how our operations actually work, with the caveat that this was one of the snowiest winters and Februarys in Minneapolis history. So we actually think that without so much snow piled up, that we might actually be able to improve on that number. So that's an exciting thing. But you can see that we made a big jump especially in the first 8 hours. We made a 50% improvement on our average parking lots that we were able to get to in the first 8 hours. So we're feeling pretty proud of that, the change that we were able to make between the early winter and the late winter. So again, it was the snowiest February in history. We did this tracking for 2 inches or more. We had an extreme amount of ground cover, so that did slow down some of our processes later in the winter. We did learn that the late winter and early spring snows required much, much less salt and sand than in the early winter, even though there was more snow, because the sun is so much stronger that it's not needed or practical to put it down, that the sun will melt it before it's going to become a danger to the public. We also had 2 of our MEO staff members were out on workers' comp in the early winter and 3 in the late winter. So we also understand that if we were staffed with the full FTEs working, that might also have an impact. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. Can you go back to the first slide where you give the tonnage of salt? Because I was confused. Is it 5% or 10% of a mix?
It's a 5% salt. I'm sorry, my first time. Chair Musich, Commissioner Meyer, it is 5% salt, 95% sand
so
mixture.
5.3 is 10% of 53, right?
You're right. I'm sorry about my bad math there.
Okay. So it's like 2 point something.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Are the maps of what we plow and don't available to the public anywhere?
This is only available to us internally right now, but it could be something that we could look into.
Okay. Have we ever brought those maps for discussion to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee or the Bicycle Advisory Committee or any other outside groups?
Chair Musich and Commissioner Meyer, I'm not sure. I'm looking like no. The answer is no.
Okay.
But I would have to look into that to be sure.
So I'd like to request, if it's possible, to make these maps available online somewhere and to bring them to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee for them to review. I talked to a few members of that committee who had interest in doing that. If we can bring that to them, and I recognize that we can't plow all of our surfaces, but there are some that people feel are high use that should be plowed that aren't. But I really appreciate all the work that you've done into documenting this and all the improvements that you've seen, especially given all the issues we had in February. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Forney?
Thank you. I don't know if I've asked this question before, but geothermal, I know, has been used in some Canadian communities to actually melt the snow on roadways. Are you aware of any of that?
I am not actually, I'm sorry.
Assistant
Jeremy, are you?
Superintendent Barrick?
Chair Musich, Commissioner Forney, aware of it, also understand it to be incredibly costly, but I don't know that we've looked into it to actually research it for an exact cost in Minnesota. But I do know that in speaking to Canadian colleagues, it is costly. So,
What was that last?
I
It's very
know in
costly.
speaking to Canadian colleagues in like Surrey, British Columbia, they've explored it and I think they've even used it, but it is incredibly costly.
And I know it's very costly, and I don't know if anybody, I'm sure that somebody's done an analysis of the initial cost versus the long-term, and then the long-term, of course, environmental impact, but whatever, it's always intrigued me, and I don't know if it's anything we ever can do as a quote-unquote demonstration or something, but something to at least keep in the back of your mind. Otherwise, thank you for the report.
Thank you. So, not seeing any more questions, I have a couple. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Hamma, Peter Hamma.
Hamma. Okay,
Yeah, it's German.
fantastic. German.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. I'm also wondering, so we had briefly talked about the heating of trails when we initially talked about this. We didn't specify the methodology of that, but we were told at that time it was very expensive. I know as part of our exploration of HVAC systems and heating and cooling being done by the planning division, that they would be coming forward to us with recommendations of where we should be making investments. I don't know if geothermal is one of the things that they're contemplating, but I would think that if we were going to invest in a geothermal system for heating and cooling a building, that it may behoove us at that time to also explore melting snow and ice off of the surrounding sidewalks in that area as well. So, not something so much for you, but something to just put in the back of your minds, planning staff that are here tonight in the audience. When we talk about the percentage of salt that we add to the sand to allow it to be loose enough to be able to be applied, are we utilizing the lowest amount of salt possible for that use?
Thank you for that question, Chair Musich. We actually pick it up from the city.
Okay.
We do not procure it ourselves. It's the same combination that they use, and that is done for access. We would have to build a whole infrastructure in order to
Mix
have
it
our
ourselves.
own systems of doing that, and it's just not something we've done up to this point.
Okay.
And I do, talking to some of the colleagues at the city, the city also has had its leaders in public works going through the same training that we have and have been taking some of the same considerations. They're very aware of what they put down and when and its impacts. So I imagine that they're using industry best practices.
Okay. If we could ask them if it's possible to further reduce that, because unfortunately salt, once it's in our water bodies, never goes away. And at some point we are going to start killing our lakes out of a desire to keep people safe. And that's going to be very problematic for us. So if we could talk to them about that and the potential to reduce it, that would be great. I know there's also a brine mixture that has much less salt in it than traditional applications. I don't know if it's much less salt than the mixture of sand and salt that we're utilizing currently, but if it is, could we discuss further with the city when they might intend to convert to a system like that, and if we'd be able to utilize their procurement services to allow us to make that conversion as well. Seeing no further questions still, I would now at this time thank you so much for being here this evening and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. We are adjourned.
I'd like to call the planning committee together.
Chair Forney, just for the record, I'm appointing Vice President Hassan to your committee this evening.
Okay. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Meyer.
Present.
Commissioner Vita.
Present.
Vice President Hassan.
Here.
Vice Chair Cogill.
Here.
Chair Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
We'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, July 10th, 2019.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
You'll abstain? Okay. Thank you. We have only one action item. I should have stated that from the beginning. I'm sorry, as far as the approval of the agenda. Resolution 2019-283 has been pulled. I'm sure it will be coming back to us, but it has been pulled. So I'll take a...
And also, and that has, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to move Resolution 2019-282.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-282, a resolution granting temporary access and construction easements to Ryan Companies, U.S. Inc. and Arcadia on the...
I'm sorry. I did exactly the wrong thing. I wasn't reading what I'm doing. Okay, anyway, that is the one that is going to be removed.
Okay.
And so it's Resolution 2019-283 that is on the agenda.
Okay, I would like to move Resolution 2019-283, a resolution approving the charge and slate of a community advisory committee for Parks for All, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board 2021 Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you. And I could use the excuse that it's so late, but can't even do that. That just happened. But anyway, can we, would people like to have a presentation?
Madam Chair, I will move a motion to table as well this resolution, as there's more people that would like to comment. And
You want to table Resolution 2019-283?
Yes.
The CAC?
yes,
Oh, okay. All those in favor of tabling, well, first of all, maybe there should be discussion on it.
Motion to table is not debatable.
You just have to
Oh,
take a
thank
vote.
you. Thank you. You are correct. Okay. So, all those in favor of tabling the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? Okay, so I guess it sounds like we are tabling it. So therefore, I guess I have to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So I'd like to request still the presentation on it. And we
For
have,
what?
well, because
It's
we have the
been
youth
tabled.
design team here for it, right? They came, I think they're waiting for it. My understanding is that this was postponed because there's some concern about some of the people on the committee, so there was a request to take more time to review that. But,
Have a presentation.
You can't have a
on the table
presentation
thing.
if you tabled it, right?
well,
Yeah,
you
it's
can.
done.
Commissioner,
Would pleasure to jump in. President Bourne.
Chair Forney, I think you could entertain a motion from anyone on your committee to add a study report to the Parks for All master plan and receive a presentation tonight on the process if folks wanted to hear a presentation.
I would like to make that motion.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. We will have a presentation then, Carrie.
All right, good evening, Chair Forney, Commissioners. We're going to give a brief presentation on the Parks for All, the Minneapolis Park Board 2021 Comprehensive Plan. So we're here tonight to bring a resolution before you approving the CAC charge and slate. But we'll back up and just talk a little bit about the project, which we've briefed, I think, most of you on. But basically, it's that our current comprehensive plan expires at the end of 2020, and so we will need to create a new comprehensive plan by the beginning of 2021. So as part of that, we are required to have a community advisory committee. But a little bit about what the comprehensive plan is. It's our policy direction, our touchstone. It's based on our shared values with staff and community, elected officials. It provides guidance to us in setting the budget, policy development, programming, physical parks over the next decade. It's a great tool for communicating what we do, both to ourselves, our staff, and to our community. And it's really about building on what works in addition to identifying gaps and opportunities for improvement across our system. What it is not, it will not start from scratch. We'll build on service area master plans, strategic directions, activity plans, other studies and reports and policies. It will not take the place of the Parks and Open Space chapter with the City of Minneapolis' comprehensive plan. It does not focus recommendations on individual parks, but focuses on the system as a whole. And Parks for All is not required by Met Council. So this wheel shows some of in our initial scoping stage, some of the topics that have been identified that will be explored as part of the comprehensive plan, and this list is growing. We've already been out to over 50 events in community talking to them, and have just launched a series of staff workshops actually today to start convening some staff dialogue around the comp plan. So like I said, the new comp plan will expire in the end of 2020, so the idea is that we pass this and approve and adopt a new comprehensive plan by the end of 2020. So we're currently in the vision and discovery stage. These are some of the groups that are involved in the comprehensive planning process. So as I mentioned, we are required to have a community advisory committee help guide the process. The public, we've got community collaborators who are it's basically small grants open to community groups to convene their own conversations about parks. Our awesome youth design team. Staff, consultants, topical work groups, and of course, MPRB leadership. We're getting the word out in all sorts of different ways about the plan and collecting input in lots of different ways as well. Just want to put it out there that the Community Collaborator RFP, we have another round of applications due. We've extended that to September 7th. We'll begin our CAC meetings in September, we hope. And we've got lots of different ways online and in rec centers, in person for people to give input. This is an example of some of the input we've been receiving. So most of our input is gathered through these suggestion cards called Dream Park cards at events or rec centers, even online. So some really great ideas emerging from community, everything from more dog-friendly areas to submerging the interstates to create park landscapes. And we also have been talking in community and to staff about, when we get comments from folk, how does it end up in the plan? And so we're happy to talk more about kind of our data analysis process and how all the input that we're receiving will impact our process. So Saeed's going to now take over and talk a little bit about the CAC itself.
Thank you, Carrie. I'll talk about the CAC role and how they're selected and also the next steps. This is the CAC chart. This is the role the CAC plays in the comprehensive plan. Become knowledgeable about the MPRB comprehensive plan and process. Understand recreation needs of the community and park visitors. Act as a liaison for the project. Help identify user groups and other groups should be consulted in the engagement process. Provide feedback on the draft plan. Help identify values, strengths within the Minneapolis park systems and within the communities. Also provide insight on the long-term policy direction of the MPRB. Please note that this CAC will not be making a formal recommendation, which is different from all the other CACs because, there'll be direct involvement with commissioners on this project, which is a little different from all the other CACs that we've been a part of. This is the CAC slate. We had a selection committee which selected 8 CAC members. We also selected alternates in case a CAC member voluntarily is not able to make it for personal reasons. The CAC slate selection committee. The selection committee included Minneapolis Park Board staff from various divisions and also a member of the public. We invited all neighborhood organizations to be a part of this process, but we've had only one person actually attend the CAC selection. The CAC commissioner appointees, as you can see, we've had a few of the commissioners appoint while we're still waiting on others. And if you guys can please do so, that'd be awesome. This is the process that we use to actually select the CAC members. Is a new tool we're using right now. We try our best to follow. This process. We look at race. We look at language diversity, people with disabilities, and all the highlighted areas here you see is folks that we selected on that process. We were fortunate enough to get as many folks on that process. The areas that are not highlighted are areas that we're not able to get them. So for the commissioners that have not appointed yet, if they could please take a look at those areas and select from those CAC members or applications. The community engagement, so far we've done 4 workshops. I think it's about close to 100 events by now, because we do at least 4 to 5 events, sometimes a day. And we had 4 PAC meetings. The next steps for the project, after hopefully the approval of this process, we'll have our first CAC meeting in early September sometime. Any questions?
President Bourne?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Warney. I did have some questions. If we can go back to the slide with kind of the different representation of folks that have already. So if I'm, you were just there. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are represented in the known appointees right now, or is it the other way around?
The yellow is who has been appointed by the committee or by commissioners to date.
To date, okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we brought up, or just mentioned as kind of a conversational topic as we were leading towards this, and some of my conversations with potential appointees for the chair and some concerns that they had brought up, is one, just how critically important this community engagement committee is. Probably they're all important, but in many ways this one more important than all the rest. But there was, we brought up a point in perhaps we should look at a stipend and making childcare available for these. And I know that in some conversations with staff, it sounds like childcare will be made available at these, but we're asking for an incredible commitment here, and I'm wondering if this is something that we can pilot with a stipend available. And that said, well, can you confirm, is that something that hasn't been discussed yet at a staff level? A stipend, if I understand it, is not currently being offered.
Chair Forney, President Bourne, we have explored looking into a stipend, but I will note that we can commit to reimbursements for childcare expenses and transportation costs, which we outlined in the CAC application, and that's a new practice as part of this CAC. In terms of stipends offered to CAC representatives, it gets a little more complicated with our procurement processes and entering into a contractual basis and the insurance requirements associated with that. During our the community engagement policy exploration, there was some exploration of that very idea. And due to procurement processes, it was something that we didn't push any further. It seemed really very burdensome. But we can continue to look into it, certainly.
So my request, and I don't know if we would need a board action at another meeting, and I'm not on this committee, is actually providing staff direction to do that. I just think that this is that important of a committee a committee. And that said, should we approve a stipend, that may the staff recommended slate may end up changing at that point too. There may be folks that would serve if there was a stipend available, right, and just being able to look at that. And in particular, like looking at one of the ones that's glaringly obvious that we don't have representation on so far is somebody from our homeless community, and that could and our East African and Latinx community, those and in particular our homeless community, that could be a life-changing stipend to be able to participate in something that impacts them every single day. So I'd just like to have I would just like us to have that conversation. That may change the staff recommended composition too, if that comes into play. So thank you, Chair Forney, for taking those comments.
Any other questions of anybody?
Commissioner.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't see yours.
Thank you.
Commissioner Muse.
Thank you.
Vito.
Thank you, Chair Forney. President Bourne, I guess I'm concerned about a stipend for this particular CAC right now because some of us have already made selections, and I think if we had put an application out beforehand saying that there would have been a stipend, maybe we would have gotten different people to apply to be on the CAC. So I'm not interested in this particular CAC being awarded, but maybe looking to the future and how we work that out, because I just can't say who would have applied to be on this CAC had they known they were going to get some type of reimbursement for their time on this. So I would say that if it's something that we are going to look into in the future, I'm open to that, because I do know that you get a much more diverse pool of people when you offer things like stipends, childcare, food, those simple things. But I think where we are now in the process, I've selected my person already. Others have also. I would just like to move forward with the process as is and explore those ideas in the future.
Any other comments? Being this is just a discussion item, first of all, I'm very disappointed that we are not moving on it, because I know staff is ready and primed to move forward on these things. But at the same time, I'm glad that we are holding off on it, because it really truly is putting the cart before the horse. My understanding of our new engagement policy by 9 different commissioners giving appointments, that then it was for the staff to fill in where they felt these composition goals, weren't being met. And so we are really putting, we're reversing that. And this is, I think, one of our first, CACs under this new policy of all 9 of us. I know that staff has sent out several reminders that we as commissioners need to get our appointments in. And I cannot implore you enough that please, by the end of this week, let's get all 9 appointments, in, so that staff can, if they see that there's still some glaring mistakes, can make this, being now there's a little hiatus and everything, can fill in where they see that there are the gaps. This is just such a critical CAC. I mean, they're all critical, but this one really does guide us. And so I think there's 4 commissioners that still haven't appointed. And whatever, we've known about it, what has it been, a couple months now? So the first meeting is scheduled, I believe, for September. So this is giving very, very short notice to community members, who we would like to have on this committee. And anyway, I just it's upsetting that, we haven't done it, and it concerns me that if going forward, this is how long it takes for all 9 commissioners to make their appointments, have we made a realistic policy then? And I'd hate for us to have to do that. Anyway, at this point in time, being there's no other lights and we don't have any actions, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Commissioner Forney, are you adjourned?
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I am upset about how this went out. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved.
For the time being 7:15, I would like to call to order the Administration and Finance Committee. Will the Secretary please take the roll?
Vice President Hassan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kogia.
Here.
Chair Vita.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? The motion passes. I would ask for a motion of approval of the minutes from Wednesday, July 10, 2019.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes. We have one action item.
I'll move Resolution 2019-252, which is a resolution approving an amended and restated lease agreement with the Fred Wells Tennis and Education Center for leased land within the upper post of Fort Snelling.
Thank you. We would like a presentation, please, Assistant Superintendent Schroeder.
Chair Vita, just in terms of the presentation, what I'd like to do is just go through the amended and restated lease, and I'll give you a little bit of rationale why this is happening. We did ask, after this move passed committee, I think 2 meetings ago, that it be returned to committee so that we could understand a little bit better some of the parameters that were defined in the lease. This is a lease that was first crafted in 2001 with an agreement that Tennis and Education Incorporated, the lessor, would provide services and other benefits to the park board as kind of offsets to a $75,000 per year lease agreement. What staff did in the meantime was to meet with Tennis and Education Incorporated, and they have representatives here tonight. Esther Tsai, their executive director, is here if we have questions for the organization. But we wanted to accomplish a couple things. Make certain that the offsets were things that the park board desired to have happen, and that we were receiving reasonable compensation that could be understood, and that when those offsets were to happen, that they would report back to the board on a yearly basis. We also wanted to make certain that the rent amount, which would be perpetuated at $75,000, actually made sense through the entirety of the original term of the lease, the amended and restated lease, and the additions onto that. Because when you actually do the value calculation on $75,000, starting in 2001 and ending in 2061, we wouldn't be getting $75,000 in service. We'd be getting about $5,500 in service as an offset to the lease when you consider the time evaluation. So we did a couple of things, and I'll point these out as we go through in the lease. In section 4, we added a new section and then renumbered sections 4.3 and 4.4. 4.2, we have an annual rent adjustment that's tied to the value of services of other similar recreation providers, and we know there is one. So we'll be doing some research with another one of our vendors, or if they're now no longer around, with another similar vendor, to make certain that their services, as that or other providers go up in price, that we are matching that with the services, the value of services we're getting. So we're pegging the increase in services not to inflation or CPI, but to the cost of increase provided by other similar providers. In section 6.4, we noted that the services that they have been providing were, and in the last 3 years when they've actually been accounting for these services, were being provided through programs with Minneapolis Public Schools. We noted to the provider that we don't speak for the schools, and we were intending for the services, while they do support Minneapolis youth, that they would be guided by direction from our staff. So we noted that the value of those services may or may not be used at as an offset to the lease. And finally, we added, actually, I shouldn't say finally, we added section 6.5, which was a section for thresholds for performance. And we added an attachment B, which would be updated every year so that we could understand the services that they're providing. We've actually filled it in for 2019 using the information they provided us for services that have been delivered over the last 3 years. And we actually, to be fair about what they are doing, we do believe they're providing significant services. We just haven't been aware of that. So in a way, kind of shame on us for not tracking that. We will be tracking it going forward. And one of the primary methods for tracking is noted in section 6.6, where we ask for an annual presentation where they can be reviewing that and we can be discussing any changes or upgrades to the performance thresholds for the upcoming year.
Thank you.
So thank you for indulging us in this as we returned it to committee. We felt these were important aspects. We have discussed this with the lessor, and they're supportive of the changes we're making.
Thank you. Any questions? President Bourne?
Thank you, Chair Vita. I'll be really brief, and I just want to thank you guys for coming out a second night, and thank you for the work that you do with us. I do have, and I wanted to thank Assistant Superintendent Schroeder and Bangora, and Superintendent Bangora, and Tyrese and Mary Merrill. Over the last several months, folks have been noticing that we have all of these wonderful partnerships where we receive recreational services in trade and offset in rents, but we might not always know what they are, and we might not always be doing the best job of collecting on those, and then our youth are being underserved, and then we're also subsidizing leases with some of these partners. So Assistant Superintendent and maybe Deputy Superintendent, can you talk a little bit about what mechanisms we're putting in place to understand what those are and making sure that we're getting our value add to the for youth and for our recreational opportunities with these leases in general?
The deputy and I have talked about this, and I think that maybe this is exemplary of what's gone on. So this was a lease that was first crafted in 2001, and as I reviewed this with Director Weisman, she kind of tracked through what's happened, and I think it's kind of like that game of telephone where the information is passed on and things get lost, and eventually you get to the point where we just are not tracking it to the point that we should be. So I think what's important for us, and what Secretary Ringgold and I have been talking about, is actually managing these contracts in a more direct way, so that we're not looking at them at the point when they become expired, but we do have quite a bit of tracking we need to do, and the deputy and her assistant have made this a priority, I think, to try and get these in order and tracked. And it is something that we recognize is necessary, and we believe it will actually return the value that these kinds of agreements were supposed to have in the first place.
Thank you.
Fair.
Assistant Superintendent, was there?
President Bourne, Chair Vita, the only thing that I would add is that, yes, we're creating a database, we're laying it all out into a spreadsheet, we're collecting all of these contracts into one place, at least all of them that we can find. So some of this is a little bit of a search game too. But what I think is really maybe an evolution in how we have thought about these contracts is things like adding the performance metrics into them. That's something that we first saw come through in a lot of the LOPIT-related contracts, as well as within the contract identifying the role of an agreement representative. So I think we have become more sophisticated on how we think about these, and so as we renew each of them, we'll need to learn from those best practices and incorporate that into new documents of this type.
Would it be, thank you, Chair Vita, would it be overly onerous to request, and we don't need to start doing it next month, but I think it would be a really good informational item for us and for the community to know some of these fantastic partnerships. It would also kind of create incentive for us to like, oh, we need to remember that these are in here because there's a quarterly board report and this month it's on this partner, and this partner, and what those services in lieu of rent might be. So I would just, I don't need a response right now, but maybe if staff want to think about what that would look like, that wouldn't be an overly onerous process to report back to us. But I would certainly, there's some that I didn't know that we had and are fantastic. It's really cool that we have them, and I'd like folks to know a little bit more about them.
Chair Vita, President Bourne, I think actually even beyond that, being more obvious about these agreements might actually allow our residents and park users to become more aware of the kinds of services we're striving to get, and so they can take better advantage when we have created these kind of agreements.
Thank you, Chair Vita.
Thank you, President Bourne. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Schroeder. This came up a couple months ago with the Deputy Superintendent and I knew that it was going to be pulled back so that we could figure out how to maximize this relationship. And again, I appreciate all the work that everyone has done on this. I'm looking forward to future committee votes on these type of leases and partnerships that we have. So thanks again for all the work. Thanks to you two for bearing with us for a second time and coming out. I really do appreciate all that's being put into this partnership and looking at how these add-ons, just different things can help maximize this relationship. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Madam Chair, just one.
Oh, we have to vote. I'm sorry. Okay. So all those in.
Also, Madam Chair, just one question, and this
Okay.
is a contract that I remember working on back in, well, the Wells Tennis Center. My partner, Jim Michaels, worked on it, trying to get some looked at. Did we ever get an accounting from Fred Wells about the usage? Because they were supposed to, I remember this provision in the agreement that it was kind of use in lieu of rent. So did anybody on our staff calculate that?
Chair Vita and Council Rice, when I met just this week with the Executive Director of Tennis and Education, she's been there for the last 3 years, and they have provided us with an accounting of the last 3 years. We didn't have a record of how we've been taking advantage of the agreement prior to that, and I don't believe the lessor had any records of that either. The thresholds of performance were based on kind of an interpolation and extraction of the performance that they've had over the last 3 years, which appears to be reasonable, and in fact, significant in the number of youth and families served.
Okay. I mean, I think that, I think what the superintendent or assistant superintendent Schroeder is suggesting is good, with an annual report as a way to check in, because I know that in the past, there was an accounting, it was a good program, and again, it's maybe one of those things that you look at. You know, as lawyers, when we did this, that was the deal, that they would, you know, basically their annual cash rent shall be reduced by the aggregate of all money value conferred on the lessee. It's determined based on the provisions in which was section 6, which was the operational aspect. So I think it's good. And I think the idea that they come and report to the board is good too, but if you start looking at all the partnerships you have, the Lopet, Fred Wells, other multiple things, somebody's gonna need to manage your agenda. You've got a new board now to look at and awareness. Really is a great program. They've done a lot of good educational things. I think that the Wells Tennis Center is probably the great example, or one of the great examples where we've had partnerships that have worked, but it's also like how much, now it's easy to do it at night on 7:30 when you're done with your agenda, but if you either you might need the superintendent or the deputy or the head of planning. Planning could just plan to have meetings where maybe you have a whole slug of people coming in one night and say, here's what we do and here's how it's working. Or you need to deputize someone else to look at it and say, okay, as long as it's working, you don't have to report. I don't know. I'm not trying to hold up this agreement. I think you should vote on it and go ahead. But
Sounds like
it's a bigger, it's a bigger problem. I mean, I think for this board, when you look at all the partnerships and the St. Anthony Falls Board, other things like that, I mean, there's a lot of agreements out there that are like this that should or could be flagged.
Thank you, Council Rice. All those in favor of Resolution 2019-252, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Although, a motion to adjourn? All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned.
Thank you. I'll reconvene the regular meeting of July 17th. I consulted our board rules and I gave some incorrect information during petitions and communications. A motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of adding an item to the agenda requires a 2/3 majority, not a solid 6 votes. So that said, I'm looking at the Operations and Environment Committee. Commissioner Cogill as the motion maker in the committee, seeing that the chair and vice chair are not here, I'll leave to you for a motion. Well, first I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of amending the agenda to include Resolution 2019-281 from the Operations and Environment Committee. Is there a motion?
So moved, and I made the motion, I will go.
My apologies. The motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of adding the item to the agenda has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, I would ask the secretary to take the roll. This will require 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will require 3 votes. Four votes for the suspension of the rules. Secretary Ringgold.
Commissioner Vita? No. Commissioner Meyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Cogill?
Aye.
Vice President Hassan?
Aye.
President Bourne?
Aye.
You have 4 ayes, 1 nay, 3 absent.
The rules are suspended. I would entertain a motion from Commissioner Meyer on Resolution 2019-281.
I move Resolution 2019-281.
I don't think we need to read it. You read it just a few minutes ago in committee. The Resolution 281 has been moved. Is there a second? Excuse me, I am entertaining a resolution to amend the agenda to add Resolution 2019-281. Is that your motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to amend the agenda to include 2019-281. Any discussion on the resolution to amend the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying. Is there a second on the resolution to amend?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of amending the agenda to include 2019-281, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The agenda is amended. Commissioner Meyer, would you like to move the resolution?
I move Resolution 2019-281.
2019-281 has been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second on 2019-281? 2019-281 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on Resolution 2019-281? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 2019-281 carries. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you all for hanging out with us.
Wow.